Hello. Hopefully you can all hear me loud and clear. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, wherever you're working or based in the world. Hope you're having a good Friday. And thank you very much for joining us for this is episode 2 of Thunkable on Air or Thunkable Live, or maybe we should call it Thunkable.tv. So my name is Donal, and again, Jimmy is joining us on the live stream as well today. Thunkable on Air, if you haven't joined us before, is an opportunity to look at some of the features that are available in Thunkable Cross. So that allows you to make an app for Android or for iOS, so any sort of Android phone or tablet, any iPhone, any iPad, anything like that. And the great thing about it is that you can create one app and you can install it then on any of those phones. You don't have to make any changes to your code base or anything like that. So today we're going to, this is episode 2. This is the third broadcast, let's say. So in the first one, we built a very simple app working with images and buttons to go back and forth through the images. And then last week, we looked at the list viewer. So now what we're going to do this week is we're going to look at two things specifically. We're going to look at more components. We're going to learn how to use those. And then we're also going to look at some of the built-in tutorials. So you don't have to wait every week for us to do a live stream. What you can do is you can follow along with some of the tutorials that are in the platform. So time is of the essence. Let's get started with a quick demonstration. So we're going to base it on, it's tutorial number 5 in the platform, and I'll show you where to find all of these things in the moment. But what you can do is, this is going to be the Translator app, and we've added a few little bits and pieces to it here. So let's have a quick look. Hopefully it looks okay. So I've got a little hello world here, and if I hit translate, hopefully it won't be too loud.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Okay, so it translates hello world into French. We also have a little button here for choosing the language. They're the green buttons.
Hallo Welt.
It'll change the language and also the accent as well. So there's a couple of things to do there. And then we have Spanish.
Hola mundo.
So hopefully wherever you are watching, wherever you're joining us from in the world, you can understand that. And yeah, it's a big hello world to all of our Thunkers all over the world. So let's jump into the app really quickly. Okay, so the user interface, pretty simple, nothing that we haven't seen before in terms of having a label, a text input, and a button. We also introduced rows in the previous Thunkable on Air, and we're going to put a couple of different language buttons side by side. The next thing then that we're going to do, in order to make it talk to us, we're going to need this text-to-speech component. And then to do the translation, we're going to use a service called Yandex Translate. So a little bit like Bing Translate or Google Translate, Yandex Translate allows us to choose a source language and a target language, and it does the translations for us. So these two components, we're going to find them over here in the voice section. So we've got text-to-speech and we've got a translator over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything. Hopefully that gets rid of all my blocks and everything as well. And yeah, let's have a look here. All my blocks are gone. Fantastic. Okay, get rid of text to speech, get rid of the translator, and let's start again from scratch. Okay, so this is based, as I said, on tutorial number 5. Where are these tutorials? Well, when you create a new app, hopefully this out of code tutorials panel will open up on the side view, and you should be able to see the translator here. So there's a whole load of different tutorials that we can watch. So over here, this shows us how to add a button to our app. It also shows us that we're going to need a text input and how to adjust some of the properties on the thing itself. Okay, let's go back here. Hopefully I can be heard or understood. I got to share my screen anyway, that's for sure. Settings, the USB mic, default. Okay, hopefully that is better there. Does that make sense? Is that audible? Maybe, hopefully you can hear okay. Everything should be. Let me go over here maybe. Does that make sense to this one here? Yeah, okay. I better turn that off now so I don't hear myself. Okay, get caught in an infinite feedback loop. All right, well, I did the whole demo of the app there and probably didn't hear it at all. So big welcome to you joining us. Hopefully we'll go start again. Let's just share this app really quickly. And what we're going to do is let's start again from the beginning. So what I want to do is have a look at these tutorials that are based over here on the left-hand side of the screen. if you click this blue tab here, they should open up and you get a list of different tutorials, 7 different tutorials that you can create an app for yourself. We're going to base this on tutorial number 5, which is the Translator app. And what it does is it goes through the steps that we need to follow in order to create this user interface for ourselves. So we're going to drag and drop in a button. We've covered that before, like this. We're also going to add in a text input, and we can change the size of the text. And then we're going to add in the text to speech component as well. So let's add in our text input. And down here in the voice component, we're going to add in the text to speech component like that. Then in order to do the translation, I think as I mentioned, we have this thing called Yandex Translate. So a little bit like Google Translate or Bing Translate, any one of those services. This is just an online translator. We're going to use that for translating the text for us. And what we can do first of all is let's choose Spanish because that's a very popular language. You can see there's a lot of different languages supported here. Hopefully you can spot your own and you can do a translator back and forth between whatever 2 or 3 languages that you like. There we go. And so we'll go from English to Spanish to get started. Then what we're going to do here is create the blocks for our app. So not just the user interface, but all the blocks as well. So if you want to have like a zoom in here, if you want to see a little bit more close detail, what's actually happening, you can just click on the image itself and the little animation will appear on your screen and you can follow along with that. So you can actually learn how to use the platform without having to leave Thunkable at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to take text from this text input, and I think I'll make that a little bit bigger to make it easier to see. So let's go to our text size here. Let's make it 24. I think should be a good number on the screen. Let's just make sure everything is live testing away here in the background. Hasn't really updated yet. I might need to do a quick refresh here as well. So apologies for any technical difficulties today. Let's have a look at the button here as well. I might want to do a reset of this as well. Okay. So we've got a new live Thunkable Live app for Android users. If you haven't downloaded it as well, you should go and check it out on the Android store. And while that's loading, here's Thunkable on Air episode 2. While that's loading, what we can do is start working on these blocks here for our app. Okay. Let's change the color here. Let's make that red for a second. Yeah, lovely. And some white text or something like that. Okay, so you can style it whatever way you want. We should probably change the text as well. We should probably say translate. Okay, so the user knows what it's supposed to do. And let's make the width here a little bit larger. Let's use a relative size this week. We've been working with fill contents and fill container last week. Let's set this to be 90% of the screen width like this. Okay, great. So this takes up much more of the screen width. We could put a little border around this as well if we wanted. Be a thin border, and let's give it a little gray outline just so you can see what's going on. Probably do a little bit of padding around the edges then as well. Just to indent that a tiny bit. Okay, cool. So you can play around with this and get it looking the way you want it to. That'll do for now. Okay, so we've got our text input, we've got our translate button. Let's focus on building the version 1 anyway of our app. So we have to have the button 1 click event in here. And when that button is clicked, we're going to take the text from the text input and we're going to send it off to the translator. So we've got a function here. These purple blocks are called functions, and we can send it off to the translator. And it wants to know what text should we translate. So that text itself is going to come from the text input. And it's going to send us back 2 things. It's going to send us back the status, so whether or not the translator is available. And it's also going to give us the result of our translation. So we can type in something and hopefully it'll appear then in Spanish as the result at the moment. So let's send that to the text to speech component here. Let's drag and drop those together. And so it should, when we type in something, it should talk to us as long as our volume is turned up and all of those things. And so let's try this out, version 1. Let's say thanks.
Gracias.
Okay, so what you might have noticed, let's try again.
Gracias.
So it's got the correct translation, saying gracias, but it's saying it in kind of an English accent. So what we can do here with text to speech, we're going to have a look at that component itself here. If we find text to speech, and it's got a language property. So there's only one property here. Let's scroll all the way down, or we could just type it in, I guess. Spanish, like so. And now what should happen is when we click translate, it'll say, say hello, and it should, hopefully you can hear this okay.
Hola.
So now it's saying hello, or we go back to thanks even.
Gracias.
So now it's saying it with the correct accent. Hopefully that's not too loud for people listening live. Okay, so what we want to do then is we can add in a few extra features. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah, we got loads of time. Okay, so let's add in the label to display what the translation is. So maybe, for instance, your user mightn't be able to turn up the volume, or their volume might be off, or something like that. What we can do is we can put in a translation here. No translation available yet. Bigger, let's go up to around 30 or so. Probably doesn't need to be quite that big, but just for the purposes of viewing it on YouTube, hopefully it makes it easier for you to see. And the other thing we want to do is go back to those row of buttons. So hopefully you saw there was 3 buttons. I'm not sure if you heard the description or not, but what we're going to do is put 3 buttons side by side, and we're going to use those for translating. So over here, I want my row to be below all my other components. I'm going to move it up and down in the component tree. So to put it at the bottom, we can put it there. And then let's put 3 buttons side by side. So button 2, button 3, and button 4, like this. And I'm not going to worry too much about the design until everything works the way I want it to work. So first thing here is this is a little bit too tall. So let's go back and set the height. If it's too tall, let's change the height to fit contents like that. And it's a little bit high up the screen. So in order to keep all of these UI components here, the label, text input, and the translator, in order to keep all of these things together, I'm going to put them into their own column like this. Let's just pop that anywhere into the screen. You can move them in the screen itself like that. We can put the label. We can have the text input should be down below that, and the button should be below as well. And then the next thing then that we want to do is, yeah, we've got our buttons down here. So let's go and pick a couple of languages. Excuse me. So what we can do is, let's try the example languages I went for were French. And then we went for German. And we also went for Spanish. You can choose any languages that you want. You can have as many as you want. But we're just going to go for 3 for a sample. Now, again, we kind of touched on this last week as well, but we just want to make things as easy for ourselves. So button 4, button 2, button 3 are a little bit vague in terms of component names. And what we can do up here in the properties is click on this little pencil icon and rename it. So the French button, we can call it F4 maybe for French. We can put in a couple of letters then for German, DE for Deutschland maybe, and then let's put in ES for España here, and that's going to be our Spanish button. And then it just means that when we're coding this, we won't get our buttons or our components or anything like that mixed up. We won't have the Spanish button translating to French or anything like that by accident. So let's have a look here and see if we can get this working in the block. So we want to change the language that's being translated to our target language. That's the first property we want to focus on. And also then you can remember that the accent wasn't quite right. So we're going to change the default language as well. So a couple of properties to change in the blocks. Over here then we have a few different buttons. So what happens when we click the, well, it's Spanish at the moment. So what happens when we click the French button like this? What we can do is set the translator language like that, set our target language to be, we want it to be French, of course, and we want to set the text-to-speech language as well. Text-to-speech, the default language here will be French, like so. I'm going past it there. Where is it? There we go. Excellent. And that pattern is going to repeat itself then for the other two buttons. German will be target language and default language of German, and Spanish will be the exact same thing. Now, we could do this manually if we wanted to. So we could get the button here and we could drag it out and find the other blocks. But because this is kind of a repetitive thing, or you can see there's quite a bit of overlap, what we can actually do is save ourselves a little bit of time. So a little top Thunkable tip here by duplicating these blocks. And we just have to make 3 small changes. So for the next button, when we're going into German, we're going to change the language here. And we're also going to change the language over here as well. The other thing then that we want to do is go back to Spanish, of course. So yes, I was going to go to Spanish if I can find it. Spanish. If you want your own language, let's say, to be featured in this, just drop us a comment and let us know which one you'd like to have included in the sample app, and maybe we can add a few more buttons. But what that's going to do then is change the translator language and change the text-to-speech language. Okay, so that, I think, should more or less be it in terms of functionality, and it means now we've got a little bit of time to play around with the user interface and the design. Let me turn up my brightness here a little bit so I can see what's happening. Hello world, I think, is what I was going for. Hello world. Like this. And when we click on French, it should translate the label text and the text-to-speech.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Okay, so hopefully you could hear that. If I click on German, we should be able to
Hallo Welt.
translate that. And we're not getting the output into the label. Let's test the Spanish really quickly.
Hola mundo.
And so cool. So our languages are working, our text-to-speech is working, but our label isn't changing. And the reason for that, of course, is because we haven't told the label to change. But if we put in the label1.text and set it to be this result, like so, we should have...
Increíble.
Excellent. So we have an amazing translator working here. What do I want to do then? So the final thing I think we're going to do is spend a little bit of time looking at improving the user interface here. So these buttons here, it's not particularly obvious what's happening or what's going on with these buttons. And even when you do click one, you don't get any feedback telling you that, oh, I've selected one of these particular languages here. So what we're going to do is play around with the design a little bit more. So let's change some of the things here. I'm going to make the font color white, and I'm going to change the background colors to be gray of all of them for the moment. We can make the font a little bit bigger and set it to 20. I'm going to leave it at 18. Okay. Then what we're going to do is, this is where it kind of gets interesting. So let's put a bit of margin on either side, 4 pixels, just to give them a little bit of breathing space. We actually put a few pixels at the bottom as well. Let's put an 8 pixel margin on the bottom, just to move it up away from that menu bar along the bottom. We're going to set a 2 pixel border. We don't need a border. Let's set a border radius of 4, though, to give us a kind of slightly rounded corners here you can see on the button, and the colors and everything are fine. Okay, great. So let's just repeat that. So we said we were going to have margin at the bottom of 8, and then on the sides of 4 and 4. That means that when you add 4 and 4, you get a gap of 8 here in the middle. We're going to change the colors as well. So let's go back to white for the text, and we'll go with a gray for the background color. And then the last thing I think we want is our radius, and I was using 4. So you can play around with these and find kind of values that you like, and then it gets pretty straightforward then, or pretty easy just to use them over and over again. So if we have 4 on either side, and then a quick color change, and we're done in terms of the basic or the default user interface here, like this, where all of these things are turned off. Now, because these are gray, it'd be nice then if when we click one of these buttons that it actually changes color. So if we go back to our text-to-speech, the default language that we had programmed in here was Spanish. So maybe what we want is to make the background color here a green color like that, and it looks like it's selected, or it looks like it's highlighted. And we want to be able to swap back and forth between between those. So let's take a quick trip back to the blocks, and what's going to happen here is that not only are we going to change the language properties, but we're also going to change the background color then of some of these blocks. So in here, we can change the text color or we can change the background color. There's a few different ways to do it, but let's just do it the easiest way to get started. And hopefully, if you're paying close attention, you might be able to spot what's going to happen here. So I'm going to set this into green, and then I'm going to copy and paste or do a duplicate like that. No, not the whole block, just this one particular one here. So you might be able to figure out what's going to happen. So the FR should go green, and the DE should go green like that. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen then as I click these buttons? And if you have any idea of maybe how I could fix it as well, leave a comment here. And so by default, it should be green like that, the Spanish one here.
Gracias.
I might turn that, well, that's okay. So when I click German, that one goes green as well.
Dank.
And when I click French, that one turns green.
Merci.
So what we want to do here, in this case, it's going to be kind of like a toggle. When one turns on, the other two should be turned off. So let's go up here. Let's add in two more. One is going to be to change the German to this gray color and the Spanish to this gray color. And you do the exact same thing then for the other blocks as well. Let's change the French to be gray, like this. And the Spanish to be gray. And yeah, give yourself bonus points there if you figured out what was going to happen ahead of time. And the final one here, so we're just going to use those two blocks. What I'm doing here, just in terms of duplicating the blocks, I'm actually just using the normal kind of keyboard shortcut. So Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. And that just, again, another little tip, just helps everything speed up and get these things done a little bit quicker. So let's try here.
Hola.
Okay. If we try now, you can see that it's green in the middle.
Hallo.
And if we try over on the left, you can see it's only the button on the left.
Bonjour.
And we can tab back and forth between them. We can change our mind a couple of times.
Hola.
And the state of the buttons that we're using is always kept. It's always preserved. So let's play around with the design a little bit more. Yeah, that's definitely again a top tip, let's say, is that when you're trying to get something working in your app, is to get the functionality working first. So we just added in those three plain buttons. We tested out our blocks to make sure that they were working. And then what we did was we improved the design a bit. So make sure everything works first of all. It's a little bit too close here. So I'm going to put a little bit of padding in along the top here. Let's throw in 8 pixels of padding. And okay, the other thing then that I want to do is maybe let's use a variable. So we've got a couple of minutes left. What we could do is create a variable like this every time. So we've got, now that we have it working, we want to see, is there a way that we can make our app more efficient by using fewer blocks? So even though these blocks, the color changing blocks, are pretty similar, there's slight differences, so we won't worry about that just yet. But these ones here are almost identical. So the target language and the default language, target language, default language. And we seem to be using those, well, we say 24 blocks, is that right? 12 blocks over and over again. So maybe we can cut that down. We can go from using 12 to cut out a few of them anyway. Let's make it a little bit more efficient for ourselves. I think we're only going to save about 6 blocks, but it'll still hopefully give an idea of the thing that we want to achieve. So rather than using those ones over here, let's do this setting when we click the button. In order to make this work across all the different apps, or all the different buttons, excuse me, let's get rid of these ones. We're going to use what's called a variable, and we're going to set the language using the variable up here. So let's get rid of this one here. And just throw them out, although that's probably not a great idea until you've tested it, but I did make this one earlier. So let's create a variable called language, or maybe just lang, and we can set it to be our default language was Spanish. Notice then, let's just double check because I always get the spellings wrong, so that's important. So it's only one N, but the text to speech here, let's say, or the translator or whatever it is here, text to speech, it's all capital letters. So you want to make sure that you have no typos, and you also want to make sure that you don't that you have the correct case. So like that, Spanish. And then what we're going to do is, instead of using those 12 blocks, we're going to just reduce it down to 6 blocks instead. So let's set the language for this one to be, again, all capital letters. But we can just copy and paste the other two languages like this. So this one is going to be German, and the last one is going to be Spanish. So what that'll do then is it changes the value of this language variable every time one of the language buttons is pressed. And what we want to do then over here is not use these Spanish constants, but we want to reference this language variable. So it's actually very easy to do that. What we do is use this little socket here, this little getter block, I'd call them anyway, and we can just plug them in here. So if we click on the DE button, we set the language to be German, and it inserts the word German here and here. Similarly, if we do the same thing for clicking on the French button, what will happen is the language variable, the value that's stored here, that's going to be changed. We won't see this happening in the blocks, but it does happen on the app. So what happens is that value gets sent over here to this variable. And when we click on the translate button, we see that the value here is French and the language is French. And then that's what the app starts speaking to us. So again, it shouldn't change the functionality, but it just means that we're using fewer blocks in our app. So let's try it out, and hopefully, if everything is still correct, everything should work correctly. Let's try Spanish.
El final. Das Ende.
Everything seems to be
La fin.
working reasonably well there. Anyway, okay, so yeah, of course, there's more that we could do in terms of making maybe a little function here to change the color of the background that we want, but that might be a topic for another week. So just to do a quick summary or a quick recap here, if you're looking for new projects or you're looking to learn about the platform, a great place to start would be in these built-in tutorials. You can access them at any time. There's a little blue button over here. You can access them at any time and go through them all like this. And at the end, what you'll get then is some of them will have a little suggestion as to how you can make this more challenging or more interesting or whatever you want. Maybe as a challenge to you, maybe I can leave you a challenge to use the speech recognizer. And then what you can do is, rather than having to type in, you can just speak directly to your phone. Maybe that'll be an interesting challenge for you there. So you can learn from Thunkable and about Thunkable anytime that you like by following along with one of these great tutorials. We also introduced then a couple of new components. So we introduced text-to-speech, and that's a pretty simple one to use. It's only got a language property here, and we used a translator. So you can also choose your source language. That might be another way to modify this app, is by having one as your source language and one as your target language, like that. The final thing we did then was we kind of looked at the idea of what's called refactoring your code, or rewriting it to make it a little bit more efficient and make it a little bit more easy to use and easy to maintain. So we introduced a variable, just a piece of information that can change, and we set the language via the variable. And when we're asking for a translation, we set our target language and our default language based on the value stored in the variable, rather than doing it over and over again at the time that the translate buttons themselves are clicked. Okay, so let's go back here. How do I stop screen sharing? Okay. So apologies for the audio delays or audio issues if there was any at the beginning. What I'm going to do is post the link. I always forget to do this. So let me grab the link. Let's share that. Let's generate a link here. Copy that there, like so, and paste that into the comments. Okay, amazing. So, oh, that's not the right link. That's the link to the stream. Let's get it one more time. Okay. Well, hey, you can watch the stream again. So hopefully you do. If you liked it, don't forget to click the like button. And if you want to watch more tutorials, you want to get notified about tutorials, please subscribe to the Thunkable YouTube channel. Okay, so it's Patrick's Day weekend over here in Ireland. So I want to wish everybody happy Paddy's Day wherever you are around the world. Hope you have a good one, and looking forward to you all joining us next week for another Thunkable on air. So, slán.